I tried.
Okie doke. All right, here we are. One of the key reasons to start on time, I don't know who's waiting on the other end, if they are even waiting on the other end or not. We'll talk afterwards about trying to see what we can do about getting the actual file loaded up to the WhatsApp chat. So Shragi could can you
I guess I used the big cups.
Any more big cups?
I can recycle mine after. Okay, so Lamaisa, today's daf is daf Dalet. We're learning the Megilla. Means Hashem. We have a packed daf today.
What page will you find?
We will be right now starting from 3B.
3B last, we call it.
Yeah, the last on
The
3B.
last of 3B.
I'm guessing the last. Gufa is where we're holding.
Almost sure.
We really got to do a better job of starting on time.
He's writing me.
No. I said we. I include myself in the group. Primarily, it's my job. So, and it's hard for me. I can't just start talking to a space, Especially today, I have to Everyone's very makbid on the time they need to leave. We're not makbid on the time we need to start. I'm just pointing it out.
I had an uncle who said that about Midnight. He said it's like a train. Everyone gets in at different times. But they all
get off the same stuff. Okay. Daf Daled is today. We're starting on Gimel Amid Beis Gufa. So we're going to see today a series pretty much for the first half of the daf, a series of statements from Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, who was one of the earliest Amoraim. He pretty much opens up the entire halacha of Mikra Megillah over the next Amud, pretty much. We're going to see one statement after the other as it pertains to the halachas of Kriyas Megillah, cities, walled, unwalled, v'chulu v'chulu. Gufa, Amr Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said the following halacha. This is actually quoted from earlier on Daf Beis. Krach is a walled city. Krach v'chol hasamach. We said the Krach reads on the 15th. Walled cities reads on the 15th. And also all of the cities that are in close proximity, that are nearby, also read on the 15th. And also v'chol hanira imai, anything that can be seen from the walled city, nida in kekrach. So again, what we're saying here is walled cities are on the 15th, unwalled cities on the 14th. But if I have an unwalled city that is in close proximity or can be seen from the walled city, it is batal, it is subsumed under the status of the walled city, and therefore it reads on the 15th. Now, that's a statement of Yoshua ben Levi, and Amayra comes along the Gemara and brings a brisa that effectively supports that idea. Tana, the brisa says, Samuch, afal pisha einay nira, if it's close, even though it can't be seen, nira, afal pisha einay samuch, or it can be seen, even though it's not close by, both of those scenarios would fall into this category and therefore be considered as if it's part of the city that has a wall and would read on the 15th and not the 14th. Now, the Gemara is trying to explain these two cases. Bishlama, nira, afal pisha einay samuch. I understand a case where you can see the city, but even though it's not close by, mishkachas laki going to yasva b'rosh hahar. That's talking about where you in the krach are up on a mountain, looking down below you. So even though you're not close at all, it's very far away. But the advantage of your height advantage provides you the ability to see the city, and therefore that would be a case where you would still call that city down below a walled city, at least as negea the halach of Megillah. How could you find the case where it's close by, but for some reason you won't be able to see it? Meaning, it can't be that the wall around your city is so tall that you literally can't peek out somewhere to see the city that's right next to yours. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? It's very simple. Zakti Gemara. So the same way you could be on high in a mountain, it can be that yours walled cities, let's say at the end of a cliff or something like that, and there's a valley below. And so from when you're staring out your window, nice. Okay, that's a nice picture. Very nice. Okay. So when you're staring at over the cliff, you wouldn't see the city down below. So that city down below would still read on the 15th as if it has a wall, even though itself it's an unwalled city. Okay, that's the first statement of Yoshua ben Levi. Continues the Gemara. So here we have to just have a quick hakdama. Does anyone here know what the story was with something called Batei Arichoma? Batei Arichoma, it literally is referring to the homes that are sold inside a walled city. So there's the din of Megillah, which we're distinguishing between a walled city and an unwalled city. That distinction exists in other places in the Torah. One other place it exists is referred to as Batei Arichoma. There are psukim in Vayikra, I think in Dvarim also. But the sugya of Batei Arichoma goes as follows. It's a real estate sugya. So pretty much the halacha is as follows. If I sell a piece of real estate, the halacha is, as we all know, that although I can sell it to you and you'll own it for the next certain amount of years, comes the Jubilee year, when Yovel comes, the halacha is that all ownership of property goes back to the original family that owned it. So even, let's say you're on hard times, you need to sell some real estate, or you got a 1031 exchange or whatever it is, the halacha is that when the Yovel comes, that goes back to you. Now, that is only true if you live in a regular city. However, if you live in a city that's walled, there's a separate halacha there. There, the halacha is you get 1 year to redeem that property. So let's say I sell the property to you. I have 1 year to buy it back. If I don't buy it back in that 1 year, I am effectively relinquishing all control over. Why is this moving? I'm effectively relinquishing all control over the property. If I'm relinquishing all control of the property, even in Yovel, it does not go back. So there's a very important distinction between whether it's a walled city or not, as it pertains to all sugyas of real estate. Exactly. So you only get 1 year of redemption. So now, Rabbi Shua ben Levi is going to attempt, at least according to certain Rishonim, to juxtapose the two halachas, meaning whatever the status of a walled or unwalled city is as it pertains to Batei Arechoma, one would think should therefore extend to the same status by Megilla. So that if I'm a city that only has 1 year to redeem when I sell property, then that same city probably should be reading on the 15th because it's a walled city, and vice versa as well. It would read on the 14th. You'd be allowed to have all the way up until Yovel. It seems like it would make sense. However, the problem with that is the Gemara on Daf Hey, which we'll get to tomorrow, makes a pretty emphatic statement that although the city of Tiberia, which was a walled city on three sides, on the fourth side it had the Mediterranean Sea, although for the halachas of Batei Arechoma that's considered a walled city, the Gemara over there has a suffix, is that considered a walled city for Megillah? So it's clear in the Gemara that we do not connect the two sugyas, or at least it's not clear that we connect the two sugyas. So therefore, the Rishonim struggle how to read the next Gemara. What is the Gemara about to say? The Gemara is going to tell us, what if I have a city that's walled, and it was walled in the times of Yoshua ben Nun. However, the way that city was established was that first you built homes, people lived there, they lived there for a while, and then they decided, hey, you know what, for protection, let's build a wall. Is that the same thing as if you built the wall first, and then only after had inhabitants come in? This is the question. Meaning, we need to know, is that called a walled city or not called a walled city?
And they did it by time of Yeshua ben Nun?
It was all done before Yeshua ben Nun. All before the time of Yeshua ben Nun, but the question is when the city itself was established. Did it establish it this way or did it establish it that way? So Dr. Yeshua ben Levi. Amar Yeshua ben Levi, Krach, a city that's walled, Sheyashav, that first had people inhabit and build homes, Ula Basoif Hukaf, and only afterwards did they build the wall. Nida Kikfar is considered unwalled. Now, does he mean to say, and therefore, when you sell property, you has to go back in Yovel? Or does he mean even that if you lane Megillah, you're going to lane on the 14th and not the 15th? Rashi says it's only referring to about the Arichoma. Tosas over here and many other Rishonim say, no, it's talking about Megillah. And he's teaching us a Chiddush in Megillah that it's considered unwalled and you read on the 14th. Regardless, whatever he's saying, the Makar of the halach is going to come from Batei Arichoma. My time, what's the reason for this halacha? The Sib, the pasuk says, "V'ishki yimkor beis moshav irchoma beis moshav irchoma." There's a patach under the shin, which implies then that beis moshav, the place of inhabitants, is of irchoma, of an irchoma. The irchoma itself means that it preceded the creation of the actual homes and people living there. Therefore, the Gemara understands from there shehukaf labasof yashav below sheyashav labasof hukaf, and therefore Bishum ben Levi says the halacha would be that it's considered an unwalled city. And again, what that means is certainly as it pertains to the sugya of Batei Arichoma, that means the property can go back in Yovel, and maybe perhaps we'd say the same thing by Megillah. That's a machlokas rishon. Continues the Gemara. Asar batlanim is going to be discussed in a little bit more detail in a little bit. However, asar batlanim, a simple way to understand it is as follows. When you're trying to define a city, right? How do you define a city as being a village, or how do you define a city as being a large city? So the key factor is, do we say that city has retirees? Do they have people available and sitting around to fill up the shuls? If there are always minyanim in the neighborhood, and there's enough of a population that there's just enough people lying around to fill up a minyan, you never have to really be concerned that there's going to be a minyan there for other things. That's considered a large city, and therefore it's going to read on the 14th, and it wouldn't have the dispensation that it could read on the 11th, 12th, or 13th, whereas if it's a city that has a low population, not enough people to fill up a shul, that in the middle of the workday it's empty, then that city is going to be considered a village, and it could read on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. So now, Zakir Shub and Levi, Krach, She'ein Bo Yasar Batlanim, a city that does not have to these 10 retirees, Nida and Kikfar, it has the status of a village. So the Gemara asks, I don't understand. You're not telling me anything I don't already know. Mike Kamash Malan. What's the chiddush here? Tanina, it's a Mefurish Brisa. Ezohi Ir Gedola, which is a city that reads on the 14th and only on the 14th. Kol Sheyesh Ba Asar Batlanim, if it has these 10 people available, meaning the population is high, so therefore that's considered a large city. Pachas mikana rezik kfar, but less than that, it's a village and it can read on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Gemara says, no. I'll explain to you why Rabbi Shimon Levi needed to say this halacha, seemingly just repeating a brisa. It's because krach itzrich alei. He's saying there are certain types of cities that maybe don't have inhabitants of a large population, and therefore it doesn't have these 10 batlanim. However, it's like a marketplace city. It's like a place, like try to imagine Manhattan without the high rises, right? It would be a place where we all go to work, but at the end of the day, we go home. Right, so at mincha time, marav time, it's possible for sure we'll have a minyan because there's a ton of people there. But the city itself doesn't have a population that's very high. Maybe we'll say that such a city is considered like a village. So that's exactly what he says. That even though there are a lot of people there, and there seem to be shuls filled no matter what, because there's going to be a lot of people visiting that area. In the end of the day, that city itself is nidon kikfar. It has a status of a village, and it would read on the 14th. So if Manhattan didn't have all those high rises, we'd be laning in Manhattan, pashtas on the even on the 11th, 12th, and 13th, if that halach was naik nowadays. Okay, that's the third statement of B'Shua ben Levi. Another one. B'Shua ben Levi. Krach shecharav ulabasof yashav nidon kikrach. What if I have a city? And here we're going to assume for a moment that we're talking about a walled city, and therefore it should read on the 15th. What happens if the wall fell, shecharav, it was destroyed, ulabasof yashav, but then it came back? Meaning the wall fell and then they rebuilt it. So it's up there, nidon kikrach. The halacha is, once the wall comes back, well, guess what? It's back to being a walled city, would read on the 15th. Yes, the Gemara, my charv, what do you mean over here the wall fell? You mean to say the way I explained it, that the wall fell, and now what would you be saying? You'd be saying that as long as the wall is not rebuilt, it's no longer considered a walled city for the halachas of Megilla, Yoshev in, Yoshev loy. That can't be. Why? B'hatanya is a mefurish brisa. Rebbe Eliezer bar Rabbi Yossi Yomi, what did he say? Pasuk says, "By Batei Arichoma." So here you see we clearly do extend the rules of Batei Arichoma to Megillah. Asher loy chayma. Loy here is written Lamed Vav Aleph in the Gemara, but if you open up a Chumash and you see the way it says over there, in the Chumash it actually says the word lo like no. So let's read the pasuk like that. Asher lo chama. That it does not have a wall. However, we said the other day there's something called Yesh Aim Lemikra and Yesh Aim Lemisora, that although the words written are written as lo Lamed Aleph no, they are read, even though it sounds the same to us, they are read Lamed Vav as if lo, like it has. But therefore the words would be Asher lo chama, that it does have a wall. So there's a dual conflicting message in the pasuk that implies that for this rule to apply, it has to have a wall and it has to not have a wall. So how do you explain that dual messaging? Zakti Gemara, this is the opinion of Rebbe Eliezer Rabbi Yossi. He says, Af al pisha ein lei achshav v'hayo lei kaidem l'chein. So you see clearly that he holds that as long as in the times of Yeshua ben Nun there was a wall, even if the wall is gone, it never loses its status as a walled city, and therefore forever la'olam v'ad it's going to read on the 15th. No questions asked. So that means, how could you, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, be telling me that if the wall fell, only when you rebuild it does it get back the status of a walled city? The implication over here is that it's pretty emphatic. If you don't have a wall, it doesn't matter. As long as you had a wall, then you read on the 15th. So that can't be what he means. Elamai charav. What did Rabbi Shua ben Levi meant when he said that if it's the city is charav, and then only when it comes back does it have the status of a walled city? Sorry, not a walled city. Does it get its status back? Is shecharav masar batlanim? And really, we're not talking about a walled city or an unwalled city. We're talking about a regular, normal city that's an ir gadol that reads on the 14th. Now he says like this: if that city loses its population, okay, now it's a village. If it's a village, now it can read on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Whereas if it gets the population back, now we'll say that it reads on the 14th. The Rishonim are bothered. That's really that's a pretty obvious thing. But what are you telling me? You're telling me that there's a halacha. If you have a lot of people in the city, it has a din of the 14th. If it doesn't have a lot of people in the city, it has a din of you can read 11, 12, and 13. Comes along with Shimon Levi and says, well, guess what? If a lot of people leave the city, it no longer has a status of the 14th. That is l'chora, a pretty obvious thing. So the Rishonim explain, if you have such a city that is constantly bouncing back and forth between having and not having a population, we might say that even when it does have enough of a population, we might allow them to read on the 11th, 12th, and 13th, because who knows? Maybe people are going to start moving out. Maybe people don't like the restaurants. Whatever the reason is, people are leaving the community. It's not a city that we can confidently say is a ir gadol should read on the 14th. Okay, another halach from Shimon Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Lud, the Ono, the Gei HaCharoshim. These are three really ancient cities from the times of well before Yehoshua ben Nun. Mukfas Chomim Miyamos Yehoshua ben Nun Havas. He states these three cities would be cities that we know, even though it could be nowadays, it's hard archaeologically to know exactly where exactly Lud would be, let's say, although it seems, and Ono is also one that they talk about. There's an Arabic city called also like Kiryat Ono, I think is what it's called.
Yeah,
there's machlokas whether that's the actual one or and Gei HaCharashim, I'm not so clear on exactly where that is. I'm not so good on the geography. However, the point is these three cities, these ancient cities, were easily at least 3,000 years old, obviously before the times of Yoshua. And obviously what he means to say is, and therefore nowadays, even if it maybe doesn't have a wall, the halacha would be, you'd read on that on the 15th and on the 14th. The Hani Yehoshua Banani, ask the Gemara, you're telling me that these cities of On, and Lud, and Gea Harashim were built by Yehoshua? That can't be. The Ha El Pa'el Banani, El Pa'el, and you have to know your Tanakh a little bit to know who's who over here. I'm not going to tell you that I remember. However, Dichsei, what does the pasuk say? B'nei El Pa'el Avar Umisham V'Shamad. Changes the pasuk is V'Shamad, I think. Yeah, V'Shamed. Who bana es ono ve'es lud uvenoseh. So you see at least 2 out of the 3 cities were built by this El Pa'el fellow. Later on. It's clearly after Yehoshua. Maybe even therefore after Yehoshua. And the halacha would be that maybe it should read on the 14th and on the 15th. The Gemara says, 1 second. You're asking me a question from another pasuk that's smashed when these cities were built by somebody else. Well, I have another pasuk. Ulatamech asa banani. I'll prove to you that there's a third person who maybe built these cities. And where do you see that? The pasuk says, and that sounds like a wonderful quote of a pasuk. Rashi says there's no such pasuk; it doesn't exist. However, on the side over here in the fancy Gemara, it says the point is basically what it's saying over here is that there's this fellow Asa. He came along. He was from Shevet Yehuda. Well, not from Shevet Yehuda, but he lived in the territory of Yehuda, right? And we know that Malcha Yehuda was really Yehuda and Binyamin. The other 10 tribes were up in the north. So what it says over here is that Asa went ahead and built the cities that are from Yehuda, the implication being that he must have taken care of Malchus Yehuda, which would have included Binyamin, which is where these 3 other cities were included. The point is I have 3 potential builders, 3 potential contractors on these 3 cities. The Gemara is obviously not going to say that it's a problem from the second one and not from the third one. So how do you put all 3 together? Honey, so he says, La'olam Rabbi Shua ben Levi was saying is that these cities were walled by the time of Rabbi Shua ben Nun because they were built during that time. However, without getting into the story again, the terrible, disgusting story of what happened in the territory of Binyamin, when all of the rest of Klal Yisrael fought Binyamin over the Pilegesh Begiva story. Well, in that time, the walls of these 3 cities, which were located in the territory of Binyamin, fell. The Asa al Pa'el Benani, and then they were rebuilt by this fellow al Pa'el. And then only afterward, Hadar in Pa'el, they fell again through some other altercation, or whatever it was. And the stubborn Jews said, we want walls in these cities. We want to protect our inhabitants. Asa, yeah. It's a very Ashkenazi read. Asa, or Ata, Asa, Shaptzinu, or Shpatzinu. They did a shiputz. They did repairs, meaning they made the wall again. And therefore, what he's basically saying is this was a walled city from the times of Yeshua ben Nun, and it was always walled, except sometimes it fell, and then they put it back. But again, this is sort of a kiyum of the original halach of Yeshua ben Levi, that once a city is walled from the times of Yeshua ben Nun, Allah is it's going to read on the 15th, and even if the walls were to fall later on, that doesn't make a difference. Dekanami, the Gemara says, I'll prove to you a little bit of a raya, a little bit of a smach to this idea that they were built by the 3 separate ones. What does it say when it talks about Asa? Vayomer Asa Yehuda Nivne es ha'arim ha'ela. Let's build these cities. Now it says ha'arim, the cities. It's mashma that these cities existed before, and he's just saying let's rebuild the cities, right? Michlal the arim havim ikara shma mina, because had it been that they were not pre-existent cities, but rather just new construction, he would have said something along the lines of Nivna es Arim, Eila, or let's build these new cities. But Ha'arim is implying that they existed even before he was talking, which must mean that when Asa came along, they had already been hanging around for a while with walls. Okay, that is another statement of Yeshua ben Levi. The next line, 2 lines in the Gemara of Yeshua ben Levi is probably one of the most Yisaitistic lines in the Gemara. A ton of Torah is said on it. I'm going to try to keep it short, but also give it some flavor. Amr Yeshua ben Levi, Noshim chayavas b'mikra Megilla. Women are chayav to read Megillah. Why? Sha'af hein hayu ba'osa hanes. Because they were also in that nest. So there's a lot to unpack over here, so let's just do it simple. Why would you think women should not be chayav in Mikra Megillah? Women are Jewish, they have mitzvahs, right? Now, normally we say, at least when it comes to Dinei Torah, mitzvahs say shezman grama. Whenever there's a time-bound mitzvah, women are pater. So that's why they don't have the mitzvah to do lulav and esrog. However, if they want to, they can. They're what's referred to as an eno mitzvah v'osa. They certainly can. There's a discussion: can women make a bracha when they do that? We paskin they can. But again, there's a question: can you really say asher kedishanu b'mitzvos v'tzivanu when you were never given the mitzvah? All time bound mitzvahs, unless there's a specific inclusion that they have. So, for instance, let's say sukkah, right? So the women should be pater. There was a reason why we might have thought they're chayav tesvav and pesach. So we needed to come up with a drush to tell you that they're pater. But unless there's an actual reason to include them, so for instance, by Pesach, what do we say? That since they're not allowed to eat chametz on Pesach, therefore they have the mitzvah of matzah. It's specifically because they have the lo sa'aseh, the negative commandment, that we give them the positive commandment. But had it not been for that extra special inclusion, we wouldn't have said that, and they would have been patur from that also. Anything that is time-bound, filling, sitzes, lulav, esrog, chanukah licht, Megillah, anything that is a tefillah, b'pashtas, is not time-bound, minat Torah. If you hold that tefillah is minat Torah, which is a machlokus rishonim, the simple understanding of that is that it's not limited in time. We limit it in time just to sort of, set the tefillahs up in such a way. But me'ikar hadin, tefillah is something that is really not bound to any specific time. And even if you wanted to say that certainly shachris and mincha may be time bound, but marav is at night, so there would be tefillah potentially available all day long. So the question then becomes, why would
They don't have to,
Shema, they do have to.
they do,
Yeah.
but not by a certain time, because, it creeps not like it.
No, I don't think they have I'm not sure. I'm not 100% on that. I don't want to, I'm not 100%. So the question is by Megillah. So do women have a chiyuv to read Megillah, hear Megillah? So from the argument, it's mashma that Rabbi Shimon Levi is saying they do. Now it's interesting. He doesn't say nashim chayavos b'mitzvahs Megillah. He says nashim chayavos b'mikra Megillah. They have a mitzvah. They're not a mitzvah. They have a chiyuv to read Megillah because they were also in the nest. Meaning what? So here's a machlokas rishonim, a very yesodistic machlokas rishonim. When we say this concept of af hein hayubos anes, what does it actually mean that they were in the miracle also? So most rishonim understand it to mean, it just means that they were affected by the decree that the miracle came to fix, right? So they were in Mitzrayim, so they have those nisim. They were part of the Jewish people that Haman decreed upon, so therefore they're in the nace. Rashbam is brought here and tells us, says that no. What he means is, it specifically means that the nace came through them. Esther specifically was the one over here who helped us with Purim. Yehudis is the story by Chanukah, and so to the Nashim Tzidkanios by Tzias Mitzrayim. So whatever. So
meaning otherwise every nace would include.
Yeah, I mean exactly. Right. So the question then becomes: so what are we saying in our Gemara that women have a chiyuv just because they're also included in that nace? So again, it's because there's a tour of mitzvah seishas man grama. I might think therefore that they are pater. Comes along with Shimon Levi and says that no, they were also included in the nace and therefore they're chayiv. There's a lot more to discuss over here, but I want to cover a little ground. The Amr Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Purim shechal liyos b'Shabbos, sholin v'darshim ben Yonah shel Yom. So he says that the halacha is, if let's say Purim falls out on Shabbos, so the halacha is that on Shabbos, beyond all the other things we do on Shabbos, you got to find some time to spend on Shabbos learning the halachas of Purim on the day of Purim. There's a special mitzvah to learn the halachas of Purim on Purim. And the chiddush of Yeshua ben Levi is not only is that true if it falls out on a Wednesday, even if it falls out on a Shabbos. Now, why would you think you shouldn't be allowed to do it on a Shabbos? Or why would you think there isn't a mitzvah to do it on a Shabbos? We'll get to that in a moment. They asked the Gemara, what is your chiddush that you're talking about Purim, that you have to learn the halachas of that day if it falls out on Shabbos? Every yontiv has such a halacha. My area Purim, I feel yontiv nami. The Tanya says in the Brisa, Moshe tikkun lahem Yisrael. Moshe was metakin for Klal Yisrael. Sheyehe shoyal in v'darshan, that they asked and answered, and they looked into and learned up the sugyas b'inyan shel yom. The hilchos Pesach bePesach, you got to learn the halachas of Pesach on Pesach. Atzeres b'atzeres, Chag b'Chag, hilchos Chag b'Chag. So Sukkot, Shmuas, Pesach. Now you could have answered over here. Maybe the Moshe was metaking it only for their Raisas, not for their Rabbanos. But the simple understanding is that Moshe's takana was that when you're on the holiday, you have a mitzvah to learn the halachas of that holiday. So why would I think that doesn't apply to Purim? And even more so, why would I think that it doesn't apply to Purim on Shabbos? Well, why are you telling me this halacha specifically when it happens on Shabbos? The Gemara says no. Purim is shechalei. He's specifically coming to teach me Purim. Why? Mahu detem. I might think nigzar. I'll make a gzeira that you shouldn't be allowed to learn the halachas of Purim on Shabbos. Why? Mishum de Rabba. What's it referencing? We know the halacha. We'll actually see it tomorrow because we're probably not going to get to it today. But the gzeira de Rabba, which we keep on mentioning, you're not allowed to lane Megillah or shake lulav and esrog or blow shofar on Shabbos. Why? Because whenever you're going to take it and go Daled Amos to get help on how to do it, Megillah is one of those things. So we might think that we'll extend that even to include learning the halachos. That I might go and take my Megillah, learning the sugya of how to read the Megillah, maybe which letters are written this way, which letters are written that way, how to roll it, whatever it is. I might take it to a chacham. You all right, Ramay?
I get a cold or something.
Okay. Feel better. Before Shlema.
No.
Before Shlema. Okay, so Lamaisa, I might think that Gzeira de Rabba would tell me that you're not allowed to even learn the halachas on the day. Kamash Malon Yishmael Levi says no. The halacha is that on Shabbos you learn those halachas, and we're not concerned that you're going to go take your Megillah and run to Rabbi Bloomstein's house.
COVID test is they don't have COVID.
For the simcha, for the mitzvah you're going to?
Which was canceled because of COVID.
Oh, yeah, man.
Which part mitzvah? I was supposed to go this morning to it.
Rabbi Shimon Levi, another halacha. Chayiv adam likros es a Megillah b'layla. ulishnosa bayom. So here's a very interesting halacha. Halacha is, Rav Shimon Levi tells us, and he literally is opening up the Shulchan Aruch over here. I mean, he's literally laying out it. Women have a chiyuv to lane. What's considered a walled city? Now he's telling us, Omer Rav Shimon Levi, chayiv adam likros Megillah b'layla. A person has a chiyuv to read the Megillah by night. Ulishnosa, and that's an important word here. Lishnosa could be read many ways, but two potential ways lishnosa could be read here is lishnosa from the language of repetition, right? Or like sheni, like rishon sheni, like a second, like a repetition. Or lishnosa could also be the lashon of learning, right? And like shinun, like lishnosa bayam. So what did Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi mean? Now, we understand Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi to mean that there are two Megillas. There's Megillah by night and there's Megillah by day. Shenamar, and he brings him to a pasuk. This is a pasuk by Ayelas HaShachar, right, in Tehillim, which we have been Messiah is referring to Ayelas HaShachar, is referring to Esther. That means Esther said the following words: Elokai Hashem ekra yoimam, I will read at night, meaning I will call to you at night. V'lo yisa'aneh, I will not be, I have not been answered. However, v'layla v'lo yidumi, sorry, ekra yomam, I will call out to you by day. V'lo yisa'aneh v'layla v'lo yidumi ali, and at night. So you see that she did a kriya by yom and she did a kriya by night. So you think from there that it must be that there's a Kriyas Megillah by night and a Kriyas Megillah by day. Now you'll notice the order in this pasuk is that it first mentions day and then it mentions night. That'll be important in a moment. However, his Talmidim Savrim Mino LeMikre B'Layla. They thought from what Rabbi Shimon Levi said when he said this statement that you're chayiv to read by night, Ulishnosa B'Yom. They understood Lishnosa to mean and therefore open up Mishnayos Megillah and learn the halachas and learn the Mishnayos. They didn't understand it to mean that you actually open up the actual Megillah and read from it again. Sorry, I read that wrong. And learn up the Mishnayos during the day. Rabbi Yirmiyah said that Rabbi Chia bar Abba explained to me what Rabbi Shimon Levi was talking about, going to Amri Inshi, that it really means to read the Megillah again, and the Lishnosa does not mean learn. Lishnosa means to repeat, like people say, Avor Parshasa Da, Ve'esnai, I will learn this parsha and repeat it. Itmarnami, there's a brisa to that effect, or it was said similarly, same halacha. Rabbi Chalva, Reula bir'ah, chayiv adam likroisis a Megillah b'laylo l'shnos b'yam shenamar. Another pasuk. L'man yizamer chavod v'lo yidayim. Hashem alikai lo'olam adeka. In the Medrash, we learn from there that l'man yizamercha, that we shall sing to Hashem. Kavod we understand to mean by day. V'lo yidam, which means to be by layla. Hashem alikai lo'olam adeka. Hashem, we will forever praise you. They bring a raya from here, from the Marsha, right on this Gemara, brings a raya. What is the pasuk saying? The pasuk is talking about Megillah by night and Megillah by day, and then it says, Hashem Elokai le'olam oideka. The sheet of the Rambam is that although the 24 Sifrei Tanakh, the only ones that are not going to be canceled are the 5 books of Moses and Yehoshua, Pashtus, but also Megillah Esther. Megillah Esther is the only one of Sifrei Tanakh beyond the Iker Svarim of Torah that are going to even remain Lasudlovo after Mashiach when the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt. It's a Pelagic thing. The Ravid has big hasagos on him, but the point is that that's the sheet of the Rambam. The Marsha wants to say from over here, you see that this pasuk, which is the Makar for reading at night and reading during the day, is saying Hashem Elokai le'olam oideka. It'll always be that I will be oideka. So they bring a raya from here to the sheet of the Rambam. There's a lot to discuss over here. If I were to ask you based on this Gemara, which one of the readings is more important, the reading by night or the reading by day? From this Gemara, just on this Gemara, how would you understand it? I would say night. It says over here that his Talmidim had a suffix. We for sure are going to read at night. Should we also read by day? We were not sure if he just meant to repeat the Megillah or it meant to learn the Sugyas of Megillah. That's mashma that they didn't have. But the Rishonim point out over here that although that's the case in the Maskana, when we say that you have to read by both the night and the day, the understanding is that no, the opposite. It's the daytime reading that is significantly more important. In fact, Tosfos here on the bottom says it's so much more in the Iker Chiyav of Kriya that although we say Shechianu by night, we say Shechianu by day again, which is a big pella. It's one thing from one day yontif to a second day yontif to make a Shechianu on second day. In the day itself, we're going to make 2 Shechianu by night, the Shechianu by day. Now, if we had a Sephardi sitting here, they would tell you that's not true. The Rambam doesn't pass from that way. The Rambam says you only make the Shechianu by night, and you don't make it by day. Tosfos here says the opposite, and of course, the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah go in that line. The Shulchan Aruch paskins that you do not say a Shechianu by day. The Ramah paskins to make a Shechianu by day because he understands the Iker Kriya is by day. They bring other rayas from here and Tayus. In kam makom laharich. Let's continue the Gemara. Ella, what did it say in the Mishnah? Shahakfarim makdim liyom haknisa. We discussed that although unwalled cities read on the 14th, if you're in a small village, you can read on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. The question is, why is that? Now, we said it briefly in the Gemara when we learned the Mishnah that it had something to do with the fact that the villagers were providing food to the larger cities that were unwalled. And somehow that meant that they should be makdim. So now the Gemara is going to actually deal with that. So the Gemara is going to assume at first the reason why we're going to allow these small villages to start laning even on the 11th, 12th, and 13th is in order to free them up on the 14th to be able to bring their food when they bring their food so that they can provide water and drink and other things, food and drink for the larger cities. So the reason why they allowed them to read on the 11th, 12th, and 13th was lihiyos makdim liyom aknisa because it was all to help out the people in the big city. Dr. Gemara, as we flip over Lamemra, this means to say the takanta de krachen havi, that the whole purpose of this was in order to help out the large cities. The Hatnan, how could that be? I haven't. The following halacha, our Mishnah says, what happens if the 14th falls out on Monday? Now, if the 14th falls out on Monday, what does it say? Kifarim, the villages, the ayoros, gedolos, and the large cities, korin bo bayom, they read on that day, on Monday. Now, if you're telling me that the whole purpose is to help the big cities, v'im isa, if it's true like that, likdemuli yom haknisa, why not say that the villagers should read the prior Thursday?
They'll be available.
And so they'll be available on Monday to help with food and drink for the big cities. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Do the math. If you're telling me that the 14th falls out on Monday, then Sunday is the 13th, Shabbos is the 12th, Friday is the 11th, what's Thursday? The 10th. What did it say in our Mishnah? They can't read on the 10th. You can only read on the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. That's what the Gemara answers. Havalahu asar, that's the 10th. So the first question seemed good, but Zuck there, no, not a raya. Why? Because that's an impossible day because we only allow it from the 11th to the 15th. The Gemara says, okay, fine, that's not a good kasha. I'll bring you another kasha on this assumption. Tashma, chal lihiyos b'chamishi. What if the 14th falls out on a Thursday? This is on our Mishnah. Kifarim, the villages, ve'ayoros gedolos from the large cities, korin bo bayom, they read on that Thursday. Now you don't have the answer that Monday won't be good. Why? Because if Thursday's the 14th, Monday's going to be work out to be the 11th. V'im isa, that you're saying the whole reason why the small cities read early is to help the big cities, then likdemul yom haknisa, the echadasarhu, you could do it, it's the 11th. So the Gemara says, you're right, theoretically speaking, I could. However, we want to keep things consistent. And once we're saying that if it lands on Monday, we don't push to the prior Thursday, we're not going to say that if it lands on Thursday, we push for the prior Monday. Yom haknisa, lo dachinim, we want to keep it consistent. And therefore, even though, yes, we would love to have it that, according to this reason, the small villagers would read early, but not if it's going to make things confusing, that next year it's going to fall out on a Monday, and now they're going to think, oh, what did we do last year? We went to just the previous Bezdin, we'll do it again, and that'll be a problem. They'll end up reading Megilla on the wrong day. So Tashma, maybe we have from a different a different place, a kasha on this assumption. And again, remember what we're assuming over here is the reason why the villagers were makdim, they read early, is in order to provide food for the larger cities. So I'll bring a kasha from the following. I'm Rebbe Yehuda. Amasai. When do we do this din of makdimin, of reading on the 11th, 12th, and 13th? Only, we saw this earlier, only when the actual villagers actually go into the big cities on Mondays and Thursdays for Bezdin. But aval mokim she'ein nichnasim b'sheni v'chamishi. Let's say it's just not the minhag of that city to do that, or for whatever reason they have a bezdin, for whatever reason they're not going in. He says very logically, ein korin osa ela b'zmana. They don't have the dispensation of reading 11th, 12th, and 13th. If the whole reason why they're going in is to be able to go there on the days of Mondays and Thursdays. Now ask the Gemara, v'isal kedaitach takanta de krochanai. If you're going to tell me the whole reason why we tell them to read on the 11th, 12th, and 13th is in order to help the large cities, so they what? Because this group of people in the village don't have a reason to go into they don't have their own personal reason to go into the large cities. Therefore, the big cities should lose out on having food and drink.
So what do you want them to do? You want them to go make a trip?
Yeah, I mean, if the whole reason why we're having them read early isn't for their benefit, to ease upon them the burden of coming in to the city to read, but rather it's to help out the large city, it really should make no difference whether they have a minute to come, they don't have a minute to come, doesn't have anything to do with them. It has everything to do with the large cities.
I should have asked this earlier. What do? They go into a shul and they make their own minyan?
So the machlos Rishon, yeah.
What's the matter?
So think of it this way: the villagers don't have someone to read the Megillah for them,
and they don't have a minyan.
They have a minyan, they have people there, but they don't have anyone to read the Megillah for them. The assumption is in the smaller cities, there's no one who's bekian in the Megillah. So they go to the large city where there's going to be minyanim, there's going to be Megillah. They'll be able to go over to the Balkore and say, hey, can you come here and read for us on the 11th and 12th?
It's not an option to read it in their city, according to you.
And Hanami.
So the Gemara doesn't make sense.
Why not?
That's the reason they should go Monday and Thursday.
No, the suggestion of the Gemara is that they should go in on the 11th and the 12th.
Okay.
You understand? Meaning the suggestion is to go even when they don't have a Bezdin.
Yeah.
What are you telling me? You're asking a different question. You're saying, what is Rabbi Yehuda saying? Rabbi Yehuda is saying, if they didn't have the minute to go in on Mondays and Thursdays. So obviously, Rabbi Yehuda would clearly have to only mean that halacha to be true if they had a way to read it even in their own village. They'd hire someone to come, whatever. I didn't understand your question. Okay, yeah. You're not asking on the Gemara. You're asking on the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Yes, correct. However, the Gemara is saying from Rabbi Yehuda himself, what do you see? You see that clearly we're not as concerned for the large cities, and that's the reason why the small villages are supposed to read early, but rather it must be a different reason. It must be that if it's a tircha for them, we don't make them go. So Gemara says, you're right. We're not going to say that the reason is in order for them to provide food and drink to the large cities, but rather ella ema mipnei shemisapkim. It's because they've already done it. Meaning all year round, what do? They're the farmers. They're the ones who are providing food and drink to the larger cities. So therefore, since they're misapkim, it's a special like schar that we give to the small villagers, and we say to them, listen, your day is the 14th, and it's not going to be easy for you to do it on the 14th. Why? Because the 14th may not fall out on a day where it's easy for you to get to the big city. So what we're going to say is we're going to allow you to read on the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th, meaning you can go and read on that day, which is the day you'd anyways be going into the large city to read because you're going to be there for Bezdin, for Kriyas Torah, and for other things. So it's a special dispensation that we give them as a schar for all the great things they do for the large city. But really, it's not in order that they'll provide food for the large city. So therefore, that's the, 6th or 7th statement of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Okay, so what did it say in the Mishnah? The Mishnah said, Ketzad. It said in the Mishnah, when it mentioned all of these different halachas, how does it actually play itself out? So it says, Chal lihiyos, to see the time, Chal lihiyos b'sheni b'Shabbos. What if the 14th of Adar falls out on Monday? So what did it say? It said, Kifarim v'ayorus gedolos korin bo bayom. And then it went and said a whole bunch of other halachas. So the Gemara is bothered over here. The Mishnah started by saying what? It said 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 are the days when the Megillah can be read. But then it didn't then go and say, when is it read on the 11th? When is it read on the 12th? It didn't do that. What did it do? It started saying it can be read on the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. And then it said, if it falls on Monday, if it falls on Tuesday, if it falls on Wednesday. It started talking about the dates of the month, and then it started talking about the days of the week. And it's a little bit inconsistent. So as the Gemara, Maishna Reisha, the Nakat Sidur, the Yarcha, the dates, Umaishna Seifa, the Nakat Sidur, the Yomi, and then it started talking about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So the Gemara answers pretty much, I'm just going to say it outside, the Gemara's answer is that by doing it the way it did it, it made it not confusing. Meaning if you would have done it the other way, it would have gotten very confusing. I did the mishapchile, Nakat Sidur, the Yomi. Meaning once they switched, they went ahead and did it with the days. Meaning you're anyways going to have to mention both in the answer. Right? Because what does it say? It's going to say like this. It says in the Mishnah, I need to tell you that there are 5 potential days that you could read. That has to be in the Mishnah, because that's the chiddush of our Mishnah, that there are days beyond the 14th and beyond the 14th and 15th. There are days beyond the 14th and 15th that you can read. So I need to mention that. However, if it would have then tried to say, okay, when do you read on the 11th? You'll read on the 11th when it falls out on Sunday. Why? Because if Sunday's the 14th, then you're going to read on the 11th on Thursday. And when are you going to read on the 12th? You're going to read on Shabbos. You're going to read on the 13th. You're going to read on Friday. It's when it falls on Friday. If you read on the 14th, it's going to fall on Thursday. The problem is, it's not true. There are other days as well. So it turns out like this. When do you read on the 12th? You'll have to, if the 14th falls on Shabbos, or if it falls on Wednesday. That's a lot more confusing. If I have to tell you in the Mishnah, it says in the Mishnah 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. 11 when? 11 if it falls on Wednesday and if it falls on Shabbos. 13 if it falls on Tuesday and if it falls on... So that would have been a lot more confusing. So therefore the Gemara explains that the Mishnah wanted it in a clearer way and saying first, these are the 5 potential days. It then went through each day of the week when you'll read, and if you want afterwards, sit with a pen and paper, work out exactly what date it happened to have been on, you can go ahead and do that. But in terms of explaining the Mishnah, it's much clearer. Okay, continues the Gemara. And this is going to take us to the end of today's stop. And it's not complicated, but just got to keep a cheshbon. I printed them out. Feel free to use them.
How long will it take?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Yeah. Right. What's your?
I'm supposed to be leaving soon, but I want to miss it out.
How long will it take? What time is it? 8:28.
There's gonna be a recording.
7 minutes, maybe. 7 minutes. I'll try to do it fast, but I don't want to sacrifice understanding. Okay. Okay. So what did it say in the Mishnah? It said that if the 14th falls on Erev Shabbos, so that means the 14th. So for the unwalled cities, we'd be reading when? L'chura, our Mishnah said on the 14th. When do the walled cities read? Can't read tomorrow. It's Shabbos, right? So they read on Friday also. So the walled cities and the unwalled cities will read on Friday. Kalman, mute your phone. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Chali Yos B'Erev Shabbos. So what's going to happen? The walled and unwalled cities will all read on Friday, and when do the villagers read? They read on Thursday, right? Because the Makdim and Liyom HaKnisa. That's the din of our Mishnah. Ask the Gemara. Masnisan money. Who is the Tana of our Mishnah? We're going to see two machlokim. The first machlokus is going to be between Rebbe and his Tanakama, and then we're going to see Rebbe Yossi and his Tanakama. And in both brises, Rebbe and Rebbe Yossi are effectively saying the same halacha, which is the halacha of our Mishnah. So let's not get confused with all the different shitas. There's really effectively three opinions. There's the opinion of Rebbe / Rebbe Yossi, which is our Mishnah, which is the walled and unwalled cities read on Friday, meaning we're makdim the walled cities to Friday because they can't read on Shabbos, and the unwalled cities read on 14th on Friday because that's their day to read. Now, when does the villagers read? They read on Thursday, Muslim. Okay, so that's the shita of Rebbe, Rebbe Yossi, and our Mishnah. We're then going to see two other opinions, which are each respectively the Tanakamas of Rebbe in one brisa and of Rebbe Yossi in the other brisa. So let's just go through it methodically. So ask the Gemara, Masnisan money, who is our Mishnah? The Gemara answers, Rebbe, Rebbe Yossi. It can either be Rebbe or it could be Rebbe Yossi because they both effectively say the same thing in their brises. So let's first discuss Rebbe and his Tanakama, and then we're going to discuss Rebbe Yossi and his Tanakama. My Rebbe, the Tanya, the brisa says, Chal lihiyos be'erev Shabbos, meaning this case, right? 14th falls out on Shabbos, so the walled cities can't read tomorrow because it's Shabbos, and the unwalled cities, l'chura, should read on the 14th. However, Kefarim, the villages, the ayaros gedolos magdim liyom haknisa. So this is the first distinction. This Tanakama holds that we push the unwalled cities, despite the fact that it's the 14th, to the 13th. Why do we do that? We'll see in a moment. Umukvin choma korin bo bayom, and the 15th, the walled cities read on Friday, on the 14th. Rabbi Omer Ani, lo yitzchu ayaros bimkomen. You do not push the unwalled cities off of their date on Friday. They read on Friday, ela elu ve'elu, meaning walled and unwalled. Kairin boy b'yayim, they read on that Friday, and of course the villagers read on the Thursday, meaning that's our Mishnah. So that din of Rebbe is our Mishnah. That's exactly what he's saying. Walled and unwalled read on Friday, and the villagers read on Thursday. Ask the Gemara, my time in the Tanakhama. What we're going to see over here now is everyone here is darshaning a pasuk, the same pasuk, slightly different. But the pasuk says, B'chol shana v'shana in the Megilla. Every year in, year out. And each of these four opinions have a slightly different understanding of what we're trying to pattern the Megillah's dates around. Are we patterning around keeping it from last year to this year? In what manner? So Zakti Gemara, my time in the Tanakhama. What's the reason why the Tanakhama, again, pushes the walled cities to Friday and the unwalled cities to the day before Thursday? The pasuk says, "B'chol shana v'shana." Ma kol shana v'shana. What does that mean? Ayaros kodmus lemukvin. Also, let's say Purim falls out. The 14th falls out on a Tuesday. So when do we read in the walled cities? On Wednesday. So since every year you always have the walled cities and the unwalled cities reading one day after the other, Afkan. So too here, when you can't read on Shabbos and we need to push the walled cities to Friday, I'm therefore going to have to push the unwalled cities a day before the Thursday. Ayaros kodman lemukvin, and therefore. That's how he breaks it down. That's the sheet of the Tanakhama. The aim of B'chol shana v'shana. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Maybe say that B'chol shana v'shana does not mean what you said, but rather Ma kol shana v'shana ein nitzchin ayaros mimkoman. If it falls on the 14th, we never push the unwalled cities off the 14th. If it's on a Tuesday, they read on Tuesday. So to here, Avkan lo yitzcha ayaros mimkoman. Meaning, why not agree with Rebbe, like our Mishnah, that we do the unwalled cities on Friday along with the walled cities on Friday? He says, no, shani hacha d'le'afshin. Now, this shani hacha d'le'afshin isn't really a good answer. It's simply the Gemara's way of explaining that, no, each one of these Tanaim, each had their own reason for understanding B'chol shana v'shana their way, and it's their way of saying, I didn't understand the pasuk that way. B'chol shana v'shana to me means I'm much more interested in keeping the pattern of one day separating between the two than I am in keeping the date of 14 always with the unwalled cities. That's the Tanakhama's answer. Rebbe, my timer, meaning now the Gemara is saying, okay, Rebbe, how do you darshan? And it's going to darshan exactly what you'd think. B'chol shana v'shana, the opposite of what the Tanakhama said, Ma kol shana v'shana ein ayaros nitzchin bimkoman. Just like all years, normally if it falls out on a Tuesday and that's when the 14th is, we were laying on the Tuesday. Avkan lo yitchlu ayaros b'mkomon. So to here, you leave the unwalled cities on that Friday because it's the 14th. But of course, the walled cities can't read on Shabbos, so they also go on that day. I asked the Gemara, "Ve'ema b'chol shana v'shana," say like the Tanakama, "Ma kol shana v'shana ayaros kovnin lemukvin, avkan nami ayaros kovnin lemukvin," and say that you need to have a pattern of the walled cities following the unwalled, which means you push the unwalled to Thursday. The Gemara says, "No, shani hachdalefsher." No, I don't understand the psukim of b'chol shana v'shana that way. Okay, that is the first machlok between Rebbe and the Tanakama. So we're halfway done with the 4 shitas, really, right? Okay, and Rebbe was the one who could be our Mishnah. My Rebbe Yossi, you said Rebbe Yossi could be our Mishnah also, so let's see that. The Tanya, the Brisa says, Chal lihiyos be'erev Shabbos, exactly the same case. And I'm not going to repeat it again and again unless you guys feel I need to. So we're talking about the 14th falls on Erev Shabbos. So what does the Tanakama say? Mukvin, the cities that have walls, ukifarin, and the villages, makdimin liyom haknisa, jump all the way to Thursday. So the villages make sense. He's pushing the ones on Shabbos that are the 15th. He's going to push them to the 13th, right? So it's almost like he agrees with Rebbe that when it says Shana L'Shana, that you never change the date. If it falls on the 14th, you read on the 14th. But if I have to now push those on the 15th, those the walled cities, and they can't read on Shabbos, if I have to choose between Thursday or Friday in this scenario, I prefer to push them to Thursday, meaning even before.
Give them their own date.
Give them their own date. We'll see exactly. Rabbi Yossi Omer, no. Ein mukvin kodmin layoris. You never have the walled cities reading before the unwalled. The worst you can have is on the same day, but never before. Ela elu ve'elu korin bo bayom, which, by the way, is the shita of our Mishnah. So we're going to get to our Mishnah with either Rebbe or Rabbi Yossi for slightly different reasons, and how they darshan b'chol shana v'shana, they get to the same place. Either it's because one holds you can never have the walled cities before the unwalled cities, that's Rabbi Yossi, or it's like Rebbe, that whenever the 14th falls out, if it's possible to read, we read in the unwalled cities. But regardless, you get to the din of our Mishnah, that the unwalled and walled cities both read on Friday, and the villagers read on Thursday. Ask the Gemara, 1 second, let's figure out these 2 shitas. My time in the Tanakama, meaning Tanakama Beis, right? What's his reasoning? The Ksiv, the Pasuk says, B'chol shana v'shana. Now, he says it a little bit differently. Ma kol shana v'shana. What does it mean that we want to maintain consistency year in, year out? Ayaros arba asar, uzmanu shozeh, lo bizmanu shozeh. So he says there's 2 things. The first thing is, let's say it falls out on a Tuesday, the 14th, right? So what do? We lane on the unwalled cities on the 14th. And not only that, in such a scenario, the walled cities would read on a different day. He doesn't care which day it is. It's just not the same day as the ones on that are unwalled. Right. So the Gemara says, Afkana yoros ba'arbasar uzmanu shozeh lo bizmanu shozeh, which will only be possible by pushing the walled cities to Thursday. That's the sheet of the Tanakama. I asked the Gemara, ve'ema b'chol shana v'shana, maybe read the words to mean, ma kol shana v'shana ein mukvin kodmin layaros, that you never have the walled cities reading before the unwalled cities. Afkan ein mukvin kodmin layaros, the walled cities should not read before, which l'chorah is a good question, meaning what? It should read on the Friday along with the unwalled cities. He says, no, shani hachad l'levsher. That's my opinion. I mean, that's effectively what the Gemara is answering. The Gemara says, okay, fine, my time to Rabbi Yossi. You could sort of almost make the Gemara happen on your own in your head. The Chol Shana V'Shana, he says, Ma Chol Shana V'Shana ein mukvin kodmin layaros. Avkan ein mukvin kodmin layaros. You never have the walled reading before the unwalled. The Gemara says, 1 second, maybe Chol Shana V'Shana, maybe read it like the Tanakama did. Ma Chol Shana V'Shana zmanu shozeh lo zmanu shozeh, that you don't have if it normally falls on a Tuesday, the walled cities will read on a Wednesday, so they're not on the same day. So say the same thing over here. Avkan zmanu shozeh lo zmanu shozeh, and therefore I'll push it. He says, no, shani hachad l'levsh. I disagree with that. So effectively, what do we have? Simple sikum. We have really 4 shitos, of which Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi are saying the same thing for a different svara. But the point is, if you want to know who our Mishnah is, it can either be one of those. It clearly can't be the other 2. Okay, tov. Savar Rebbe ayaros lo. Ask the Gemara a very simple question. A couple more lines and we're done. In this conversation, and this question here is, I'm not going to lie, I don't have a good explanation for how many the Gemara is in asking this question, but ask the Gemara the following question. V'savar Rebbe ayaros lo dachina liyom haknisa. You just told me that when this case, if it falls on Erev Shabbos, we say they lane on the 14th, and we don't push them to Liyom HaKnisa. That's what we just said, that they don't like that. Shani hachad l'layasher. Ask the Gemara, are you telling me that Rebbe never pushes to the 14th to Thursday? V'hatanya, chal hiyos b'Shabbos. What happens if the 14th falls on Shabbos? What does he say? It says, this is a brisa. Kifarim makdim Liyom HaKnisa. The villagers go to Thursday. Vayorus gedolos, korin be'erev Shabbos. So if for the 14th falls out on Shabbos, so tomorrow's the 15th, so the walled cities go on Sunday. You can't read on Shabbos, so what do the big cities do? The big cities don't go to Thursday, they go to Friday. That's the sheet of the Tanakama. Rebbe Omer, Omer Ani, Hoyov, Nitzchla Yaros Bimkom, and Yitzchla Yom HaKnisa. He says, no, once you're pushing them off of Shabbos, you might as well just push them to the Thursday. So what's the question? The question is, you see here clearly, Rebbe holds, you can push it, but there's an obvious distinction. Meaning when it fell out on Shabbos, you can't lane on Shabbos. So of course you're going to push it. Once you're pushing it, you can push the Yom HaKnisa. Over here, Hachi Hashta, Hasam Zman of Shabbos. That's the time that you're supposed to read. And it's Shabbos. You can't read on Shabbos. Once you're pushing it, you push it all the way off. However, V'hacha Zman of Erev Shabbos. It landed on the 14th, is on Friday. There's no reason to push it off. So I don't really understand what the Gemara's Havamina was to say that just because it landed on Friday, we should push it to Thursday. I guess maybe there's some svar to make the argument that really those villagers that were pushing to Thursday and the city people, the big cities, their din is really the same din, right? So it's almost as if it wants to say that on some level, reading Erev Shabbos really is not ideal on some level. So we could have pushed it. Why not push it? Very difficult to understand the Havamina. Last part of the Gemara, and we'll hold it for the day. Kiman Ozlo Hada Omer Rebbe Chalbai Omer Reb Huna. The following statement of Reb Chalbai Reb Huna, who is it like? Meaning, which of the previous Tanaim that we just mentioned, this entire Gemara over here, who is it like? What did he say? Purim shechal liyos b'Shabbos. What happens if you have Purim falls on Shabbos, the 14th? Hakol nidchel liyom haknisa. The statement he always made was everything goes to Thursday. Everything goes to Thursday. Everything. Gemara. Hakol nidchel zal kedai. They're telling me even the walled cities, you can mukfin the abdi lamacha. They go on Sunday. He says you're right. Kol hanitche yitchel liyom haknisa. Anything that's pushed is pushed to Thursday. Now who is that like? Kiman. That's Rebbe, meaning not the Rebbe of the earlier Rebbe. That's Rebbe of this last brisa. So
very good.
We'll pick up from here from Zera Derabba. Not bad. We started at 7:45. We did okay.
Your goal is to finish off by 8:40 generally? Is that the
8:30, but we started late. Yeah. I would love to finish by 8:30 every day. I would love to finish by 8:25 even.
Okay.
Especially today. I have
Hey, what